Tobin Maro slammed the fuel rod into the counting rack. The metal clanged, 26. He grabbed another rod from the crate, 27. Each rod held enough energy for 6 hours of sustained thrust. Each rod could power one emergency fold jump. A fold jump twisted the ship through compressed space. It felt like being pulled inside out. Tobin did the math in his head, the numbers stacked like bricks. 27 rods, one jump to safety. Maybe 2 if he ran the reactors hot and accepted a 30% chance of a containment breach. He rolled his left shoulder. The old wound ground beneath the scar tissue. Liz Durant stood by the thruster control panel. Her hand pressed flat against the metal. Her fingers were smudged with grease, a permanent stain that never washed out. The ship's engineer did not look at him. She was listening to something he could not hear. A low-grade thruster alarm. He recognized the pitch. It had been crying for 3 days. "That is 27, Tobin said. "Enough for one fold jump, maybe 2 if we push the void reactor past safe limits." Liz turned her head. Irritation flickered in her eyes. "Push it past safe limits and the containment field flickers out. Then we stop existing as matter." He knew that, she knew he knew that. The statement hung between them anyway. A reminder of what she thought of his risk calculations. Orrin Basel sat at the communications station, thin and precise. His fingers moved across a data slate. He had not looked up once. He was reading transaction logs from the past 6 months, cataloging every deal, every bribe, every promise Tobin had made to keep the ship flying. The quiet man never said much. He just watched and recorded. The proximity alarm did not announce itself politely. It drilled into the sinuses. A high-pitched whine that bypassed the ears and went straight for the bone. The sound set Tobin's teeth on edge. "New contact," Orrin said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Thorrax scout ship, fold emergence at the edge of the system." Liz's hand left the thruster panel. She moved to the navigation display. Her boots were heavy on the grating. "How long?" 12 minutes until they are in weapons range. 9 if they push their drive." Tobin did not panic. Panic was a luxury he had sold off years ago, along with his illusions and his conscience. He crossed to the communications console. He keyed the channel open and began the standard negotiation protocol. He had done this 40 times in the past year, maybe more. The words came without thought. "Unidentified Thorrax vessel. This is the human ship reliable favor, operating under independent trading license. We offer safe passage fees and non-aggression bonds in accordance with neutral zone conventions. State your terms." The response came 4 seconds later. The Thorrax voice was a dry rasp. The speaker's throat scales vibrated against each other, the sound of a creature that did not need to shout. "Human vessel, you will power down all systems. You will open all airlocks. You will deliver all personnel for processing. Failure to comply will result in immediate destruction." Liz muttered something under her breath. Tobin did not catch the words. He caught the tone. It was the sound of a person calculating odds that did not favor her. He looked at the fuel gauge, 27 rods, one jump to safety. The ship carried a crew of 6, plus whatever cargo they had scraped together from the outer settlements. The Thorrax wanted to process them. He knew what that meant. Everyone on the outer rim knew what that meant. Processing was a clean word for something ugly. "Tobin," Liz said. Her voice had gone flat, the way it did when she was trying not to let him hear her fear. "I can give you a hot start on the fold drive. It will burn out the alignment coils. It will get us folded before the Thorrax can lock weapons." "How long She did the calculation in her head. He watched her lips move. 3 minutes to prime the void reactor for fold output. 45 seconds to spool the drive. 15 seconds to execute. If the Thorrax push their engines, they will be in firing range in 7 minutes. Tobin looked at the crew roster glowing on his display. 6 names, 6 people who had trusted him to keep them alive. He had been running for so long that he had forgotten what running toward something felt like. Every jump was away, 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 always away. He did not want to run anymore. He wanted to find a place to stand. "Take us into the Scorch," he said. Liz stared at him. "The Scorch is contested space. The Thorrax call it their hunting ground. There is no safe port, no neutral station, no place to refuel." "I know what it is." "The Thorrax call it the Scorch because nothing survives there. The nebula gases strip shielding. The radiation cooks electronics. Ships go in and do not come out." Tobin met her eyes. "I am not asking you to like it. I am asking you to fly it." She held his gaze for 3 seconds. 4. 5. Then she turned and began keying commands into the navigation console. Her fingers moved fast. hitting the sequences with a practiced precision that came from years of keeping broken things running. Orin looked up from his data slate. His eyes were pale, almost gray. They did not blink. "You are choosing the nebula over surrender." It was not a question. Tobin did not answer. He was watching the Thorrax ship grow larger on the tactical display. 5 minutes until weapons range, 3 minutes until the fold drive was ready. The numbers were close, too close. Liza's voice cut through the hum of the ship's systems. "Void reactor is spooling. We have a 2-minute window for a clean fold. After that, the alignment coils will start to fracture." The Thorrax ship changed vector. It was accelerating, committing to an intercept course. The distance between them shrank with every second, 4 minutes. Tobin gripped the edge of the navigation console. His knuckles went white. "Come on!" The word was not meant for anyone else. It was a prayer to a god he had stopped believing in when he was 22 years old, standing in the ashes of a colony that no longer appeared on any map. 80 seconds to fold readiness, Liz said. Her voice was tight, controlled. A wire pulled to its breaking point. The Thorrax ship fired a warning shot. A lance of plasma crossed the space between them, close enough that the thermal sensors screamed. The deck plates vibrated with the heat. 60 seconds. Tobin did not take his eyes off the tactical display. The Thorrax ship was a predator. It was patient. It knew they did not have the fuel for a long chase. 40 seconds. The void reactor hummed beneath them. A deep sound. A thrum that became a rattle as the containment field strained against the energy it was trying to contain. 20 seconds. Liz's hand hovered over the fold activation key. Her palm was sweating. He could see the tremor in her fingers. The Thorrax ship fired again. This shot was not a warning. It struck the rear shielding. The whole ship buckled. Alarms joined the proximity whine in a chorus of panic. Liz slammed the key. The fold drive engaged with a sound like tearing metal. The ship twisted through a space that was not meant for living things. Tobin felt his stomach try to escape his body, felt his vision gray at the edges as the universe folded itself around them. Then it was over. The deck steadied. The alarms fell silent, one by one, until only the thruster alarm remained. It was still crying, a thin complaint against the quiet. Tobin blinked the spots from his vision. The navigation display was rebuilding itself. Sensor data streaming in as the ship's systems recalibrated. The image resolved. A graveyard of ancient warships filled the screen. Human designs so old they did not appear in any database Tobin had ever seen. Hulls of black metal that drank the nebula's dim light. Shapes that did not match any known ship class. Weapons ports that gaped like empty eye sockets. Liz let out a breath. It sounded like a prayer. "What is this place?" Orin asked, his voice barely a whisper. "What is this place?" Tobin stared at the display. He had no answer. The proximity alarm screamed again. The Thorrax ship emerged from fold behind them. The bridge of the cathedral ship was warm and humid. Vithrak felt it on his scales, a familiar weight that usually brought calm. Not today. The air held something else. A metallic tang at the back of his throat. Fear. The junior officers tasted of it, their pheromones bleeding into the recycled atmosphere. He did not rebuke them. He could taste his own. The sensor display hovered before him, a sphere of light and data. The human ship's fold signature was wrong, unstable. It flickered at the edges like a wound that would not close. The nebula had swallowed them whole. War Commander Zalos S. Sethar stepped into the command circle. His missing finger twitched as he flexed the remaining digits. Impatience radiated from him in waves. "The humans are weak, high cleric. They fled into a death trap. We should pursue and engage." Vithrak did not look at him. The humans did not flee here by accident. They are frightened. A show of force will end their resistance. Zalos leaned forward, his black-green scales catching the plasma glow. One clean strike and the outer systems will break. Vithrak blinked, one eye then the other, a slow process. "No." The word hung in the humid air. Zalos straightened, his jaw tightening. "We will hold position." Vithrak raised a claw toward the sensor operator. "Begin a deep scan of the nebula, full spectrum, temporal resolution at maximum." The operator hesitated. "That will take 3 cycles, high cleric. The radiation density will degrade the—" "Do it." Silence fell. The humming of the plasma conduits filled the space, a constant vibration that shifted pitch as the ship adjusted its orientation. Vithrak watched the display. The nebula glowed like a bruise, thick with ionized gas and fractured light. No ship should survive inside it. The humans had done more than survive. They had vanished. Minutes passed. The scan built its image slowly, peeling back layers of radiation and debris. Thorrax tasted nothing but his own patience. Then the display changed. A shape emerged from the nebula core. An outline, rigid edges where no natural formation should exist. The sensor operator stopped breathing. Structure detected, the operator whispered. Artificial. Composition is unknown. No match in the Thorrax archives. No match in any client species database. Thorrax studied the image. It was vast, a lattice of angles and planes that hurt to look at directly. The material reflected nothing. It absorbed light like a mouth. Xalos made a sound in his throat, a derisive click, a ruin, old and empty. You do not know that? A voice spoke from the edge of the command circle, soft, uncertain. Thorrax turned. Ithra Vorn stood with her hands clasped before her, her gold-speckled scales catching the light. She was trembling. She had no right to speak here. She was a theological observer, a scholar, nothing more. She spoke anyway. The structure predates the Thorrax revelation. She paused. It predates all recorded history. The crew fell silent. Even the conduits seemed to lower their hum. Thorrax studied her. You claim knowledge you cannot possess. I claim observation. Ithra met his eyes for a moment, then looked down. The emission spectra do not match any known period. The material degradation does not follow established decay curves. It is old, high cleric, older than our species. Xalos barked a laugh. A scholar who reads rocks. She sees ghosts in static. Thorrax raised a claw. Silence. He turned back to the display. The structure waited, patient and cold. He touched the ritual scar on his jaw, the ridge of hardened tissue where the priest's blade had marked him. He remembered the day he received it, the heat of the ceremonial chamber, the weight of the oath. I will defend the truth of my faith against all lies. The words had been easy then. The galaxy had been simple. The Thorrax were the chosen people, the first people, the ones who had emerged from the primordial warmth with the sacred texts already burning in their minds. Every species they encountered had arrived later. Every species was lesser. The structure in the nebula was not in the texts. That meant either the texts were incomplete or the structure was a falsehood. Both possibilities threatened everything he was. High Cleric, the sensor operator's voice cracked. We are receiving a signal. From the human ship. No, the operator pointed at the display. From the structure. Thorrax's blood went cold. The signal was not a Thorrax frequency. It was not human. It did not match any encryption pattern in the fleet library. The translation matrix had spent 3 seconds trying to identify the language and had failed. It is old, High Cleric, older than the sensor can date. The operator's voice dropped to a whisper. It is broadcasting a single repeated message. Put it on audio. The operator hesitated. The signal's strength is low. It will be distorted. I did not ask for your assessment. Put it on audio. The bridge speakers crackled. A sound emerged from them, thin and distant, as if traveling across an impossible gulf. It was not words. It was a rhythm, a pattern of tones that rose and fell in a sequence that felt almost familiar, almost meaningful. It repeated once, then twice, then a third time. Each cycle left a silence behind it, a silence that seemed to listen for a response. Ithra Vorn took a step forward. Her gold-speckled scales caught the light. High Cleric, her voice was steady now. That is not a language, it is a greeting. Thorrax stared at the display. The structure hung in the nebula core, ancient and waiting. And the signal continued. The pattern repeated, a question without words, a sound that demanded an answer. Thorrax touched his scar again. He felt the edge of something he had not experienced since he was a youngling chosen for the priesthood. He felt uncertainty. He did not know what to do next. The reliable favor groaned like a dying animal. Metal expanded, then contracted, then expanded again as the hull bled heat into vacuum. Tobin Maro stood at the viewport with his hand pressed flat against the cold glass. He felt the vibration in his palm, a heartbeat that was not his own. Liz Durrant's voice came from behind him. Flat, tired, the reactor is stable. Barely, she paused. We used 16% of our fuel in one jump. Tobin did not turn. How long until the Thorrax catch up? They are not chasing. Oren Basel spoke without looking up from his console. His fingers moved across the display with the precision of someone who did everything the same way every time. They are matching course. Extreme range, holding position. They are watching. Tobin said it like a fact because it was a fact. He turned from the viewport. His shoulder ached. The old wound pulsed with the same rhythm as the cooling hull. He rolled it once, twice, and the pain settled into a dull, familiar thrum. Run a passive scan of the structure. Do not broadcast, do not ping, just listen. Lies frowned. We are drifting blind. We are quiet, that is more important. She did not argue. She turned back to her board and began adjusting the sensor arrays. The ship hummed around them. The sound of a machine that had been pushed past its limits and knew it. Oren spoke again. The signal is repeating. Single message. He leaned closer to his screen. I cannot translate it. The pattern matches nothing in the database. Then how do you know it is a message? Because it has structure, grammar, syntax. Oren looked up. His eyes met Tobin's for the first time in hours. It is a welcome. The word hung in the air. On the Thorrax cathedral ship, the air was warm and thick with the smell of recycled moisture. High Cleric Thorrax stood at the center of the command circle with his hands clasped behind his back. His claws tapped against his wrist scales. A slow rhythm, one he used when he was thinking. The scan data filled the holotank in front of him. The structure was vast, impossible. Light years of lattice and void and something else. Something that absorbed radiation instead of reflecting it. Something that should not exist. War Commander Zalos S. Sethar paced the edge of the circle. His missing finger flexed against his palm. He did it again and again. The mark of a warrior who wanted to strike and could not. We should fire. Zalos said it without ceremony. A simple statement of what he believed to be obvious, before they can use whatever that thing is against us. Thorrax did not answer. High Cleric, Zalos stopped pacing. His voice sharpened. I am speaking to you. Thorrax turned. His yellow eyes caught the light of the holotank. I heard you. I am choosing not to respond. The moment stretched. Zalos' jaw tightened. The scars on his face pulled white against black-green scales. Ithra Vorn, Thorrax said her name quietly. Come to my chamber, now. The gold-speckled scholar straightened from her position at the back of the bridge. She looked at Thorrax, then at Zalos, then at the deck in front of her feet. Yes, High Cleric. She followed him off the bridge. Zalos watched them leave. His hand kept flexing. The chamber was small, private. Thorrax sat on a low bench and gestured for Ithra to do the same. She did not. She stood with her back against the wall and her hands clasped in front of her. You know what the signal is. Thorrax said it flatly, a statement, not a question. Ithra swallowed. I have a theory. Tell me. She took a breath. The language predates us, all of us. It is a root language, one from which every modern tongue in this arm of the galaxy descends. She paused. I did not believe it at first. The age markers were beyond anything I have seen. But the grammar is unmistakable. The syntax is ancestral to my own field of study by at least 40,000 cycles. Thorrax did not blink. You are telling me that something built that structure and left a message in a language that existed before my species evolved. Yes. He sat in silence. The recycled air tasted flat and sterile against his tongue. The humans went in. Ithra said it quietly. They did not run from the nebula. They ran toward whatever built that structure. Thorrax looked at his hands. His claws were yellowed with age. The ritual scars along his jawline pulsed with a dull ache. Leave me. Ithra bowed and left, the door sealed behind her. Thorrax sat alone and thought about the shape of his faith, how it had felt solid once, how it now felt like something crumbling at the edges. Tobin stood at the shuttle hatch and looked back at the reliable favor. The ship was ugly. Patchwork hull panels, scorch marks along the belly, a thruster that had been welded back together 3 times and would probably need a 4th. He had spent 7 years on that ship, 7 years running, trading, surviving, never staying in one place long enough to care about it. He was about to leave it, possibly forever. The thought did not hit him the way he expected. There was no fear, no regret. There was something else, something he had not felt in so long that he almost did not recognize it. Curiosity. He wanted to know what was inside that structure. He wanted to see the source of the light that had no visible source. He wanted to hear the message that no living being could translate. He felt like a younger version of himself, the version that had believed in things, the version that had not yet learned to treat hope as a liability. Lies appeared in the corridor behind him. Her arms were crossed. Her face was set in the expression she used when she was about to say something she knew he would ignore. This is stupid. Probably. You do not know what is in there. No, you could die. Tobin looked at her. I could die here. I could die in a fold jump. I could die when the reactor fails. The difference is that there is something in there I want to see. Liz held his gaze for a long moment. Then she shook her head and walked away. Oren watched from his station. He did not say anything, he just watched. Tobin sealed the hatch. The silence inside the shuttle was absolute. No hull groans, no reactor hum, no voices, just his own breathing and the soft hiss of the environmental system. He strapped into the pilot's seat. His hands moved over the controls with the muscle memory of someone who had flown dozens of shuttles on dozens of ships. The engines ignited. The vibration traveled through the frame and into his bones. He guided the shuttle away from the reliable favor and toward the structure. It grew larger as he approached. The scale of it stopped making sense. It was not a building. It was a geography, a landscape of angles and voids and surfaces that seemed to fold into themselves. He did not slow down. The structure opened in front of him. A section of surface simply ceased to exist. An aperture formed, perfect, silent. It was exactly the right size for his shuttle. He flew through it. The interior was vast, an empty chamber that stretched in every direction, and it was lit. A light that had no visible source. No panels, no filaments, no glow from any surface, just light everywhere, even and soft and constant. Tobin stopped breathing. On the Thorrax bridge, Zalos turned to the weapons officer. Prepare forward batteries. The weapons officer hesitated. His eyes flicked to the command circle where Thorrax normally stood. Zalos stepped closer. His voice dropped. I gave you an order. The weapons officer's hand moved toward the console. Hold. Thorrax's voice came from the doorway. He walked onto the bridge with his hands still clasped behind his back. His yellow eyes were fixed on Zalos. I countermand that order. Zalos turned. His missing finger curled into a fist. You do not have the authority to countermand a military order during active pursuit. I have the authority to protect artifacts of religious significance. Thorrax's voice did not rise. It stayed flat and cold, and I am exercising it. The bridge crew looked between them. No one moved, no one spoke. The silence stretched. Tobin looked at the light. It did not hurt his eyes. It did not cast shadows. It simply existed, everywhere. His shuttle drifted through the empty chamber. There was no gravity here, no sound, no sign of anything alive. Then the light dimmed. Not completely, just enough to notice, just enough to make him look up. A shape formed in the center of the chamber. It was not solid. It was not transparent. It was something in between, something that seemed to be made of the light itself. Tobin's hand moved to the console. He did not activate anything. He just rested his palm there, ready. The shape spoke. The voice was not sound. It was meaning. It bypassed his ears and entered his mind directly. He understood the words before they finished forming. You are returned. Tobin opened his mouth. No sound came out. The shape waited. On the Thorrax bridge, the standoff continued. Zalos's hand was on his weapon. Thorrax's claws were pressed against his own palm. The crew held their breath. The communications officer spoke. Her voice cracked. High Cleric, the structure, it is doing something. Thorrax did not look away from Zalos. What? It is emitting a signal. A new one, directed at the human shuttle. The room went cold. Thorrax turned. His eyes found the display. The data scrolling across it was impossible. It was a language, one he recognized from Ithra's files. The root language. It was speaking to the human. Zalos drew his weapon. The sound of it sliding free was loud in the silence. I am taking command of this vessel. Thorrax did not answer. He was still reading the translation. The message repeated, over and over. A single sentence that made his faith crumble into dust. You are returned. It meant something else in the root language, a nuance that did not exist in modern Thorrax. You are returned home. The air inside the structure was so dry it cracked the inside of Tobin's nose with each breath. He walked with one hand trailing along the wall, the surface smooth as polished glass and cold enough to sting his fingertips. No dust, no grit, no sign of decay. Behind him, the corridor stretched into absolute darkness. Ahead, a faint light pulsed, slow and regular like something breathing. He had left the others at the entry point. Liz had argued, short and sharp, but he had overruled her. If something went wrong, the ship needed to be able to leave without him. She had called him a fool. She had not argued again. The light grew stronger as he approached. It came from a wide circular chamber, its walls curved and seamless, the ceiling so high the darkness swallowed it. In the center of the floor, a pedestal rose from the smooth stone, and on the pedestal rested a single object. Tobin stopped at the threshold. The object was a cube, dark gray, the size of his fist. Its surface was etched with symbols he almost recognized. He stood there for a long moment, feeling the cold air settle into his bones, and then he walked forward and touched it. The surface was warm. Alive. The warmth spread up his arm across his chest, behind his eyes. He tried to pull his hand back. He could not. His fingers had locked against the cube, and the cube was pulsing, and the air around him began to shimmer. A holographic interface bloomed above the pedestal, lines of light tracing shapes he could not parse at first. Then the shapes resolved into stars, star charts, but the constellations were wrong. The clusters were distorted. He knew these stars. He knew every major sector within 10 jumps of the scorch. This was none of them. This was a map of somewhere else, someone else. On the Thorrax cathedral ship, High Cleric Thorrax stood alone at the center of the bridge. The crew had pulled back from him, a ring of scales and shifting eyes. The air tasted of ozone and fear. He opened a channel to the human vessel. No translator. He spoke the words directly, his voice carrying across the silence. "Human ship, I am Thorrax, High Cleric of the Thorrax Horde. You will tell me what you found." The silence stretched. He could feel the weight of every gaze upon him. Zalos was watching from the tactical station, his missing finger twitching against his palm. Then a woman's voice answered, flat and unimpressed. "This is Lies Durant, Chief Engineer. We found a structure. It's older than anything anyone has ever recorded." Thorrax's scales tightened along his jaw. "What is inside it?" "Human technology." The word landed like a blade. Human technology, on a structure older than the sacred texts, older than the First Horde, older than the Covenant itself. Zalos stepped forward, his voice carrying across the bridge. "The heretic speaks lies to protect his own kind. You hear this, you see what he is." Heads turned, the command circle fractured. 3 officers moved toward Zalos, 2 stayed with Thorrax. The rest stood frozen, caught between oaths. Thorrax did not turn. He kept his eyes on the viewscreen, on the darkness of the structure that loomed in the nebula's heart. "I have not lied," he said. "I have only asked." Zalos drew a blade. The metal scraped against his scale sheath, a sound like a question answered wrong. "Then ask this," he said. "Ask why the humans ran toward the structure instead of away from it. Ask why they knew it was here. Ask why their technology is inside something that should never have known them." Thorrax turned. He looked at Zalos across the bridge, and for a long moment he saw not a warrior, not a commander, not a rival. He saw a child holding a weapon he did not understand, eager to break something just to prove he could. The realization was cold and final. Zalos did not care about the truth. He cared only about power, and Thorrax had spent his entire life serving power disguised as truth. "Arrest him," Zalos said. The 3 officers moved. Thorrax was older than Zalos. He was also faster. He caught the first officer's wrist and twisted, felt the joint pop, heard the hiss of pain. He drove his shoulder into the second officer's chest and sent him sprawling. The third hesitated long enough for Thorrax to close the distance and disarm him with a strike to the forearm that cracked bone. Zalos did not move. He stood with the blade still drawn, his eyes flat and cold, and he watched Thorrax with something that might have been respect or might have been hunger. Inside the chamber, Tobin stared at the star charts as they shifted and reformed. He began to understand what he was seeing. The structure was a map, not of the current galaxy, of the galaxy as it had been 40,000 years ago. Every human facility from the first expansion. Thousands of them. He pulled the memory core from the pedestal. It came free with a soft click, the warmth still pulsing against his palm. The holographic interface flickered and died. The lights in the chamber dimmed. Then the voice spoke. It came from everywhere and nowhere, a single word in a language he should not understand, but he did. "Home." The word resonated in his chest, in his teeth, in the marrow of his bones. And with it came a flood of images, not his memories, something older, something borrowed. A city of towers rising from a sea of clouds, a face he had never seen, a name he had never spoken. The memory core held a copy of a human consciousness. 40,000 years old. And it was speaking to him. He opened his mouth to answer. The lights went out. Complete blackness, absolute. He could not see his own hand in front of his face. The warmth of the core pulsed against his palm, the only anchor in the dark. Then the voice spoke again, this time in his own language. You should not have come here. Tobin's breath caught. Now they know we survived. On the Thorrax bridge, Vithrak held a blade to Zalos's throat. The young commander had not moved when the blade pressed against his scales. His eyes were calm, almost amused. Kill me, Zalos said. Prove you have become what you claim to oppose. Vithrak looked at the blade in his hand. He looked at Zalos. He looked at the crew watching him, waiting to see which way the faith fell. He made his choice. Secure the bridge, he said. No transmissions leave this ship. No one enters or exits without my authority. Zalos's eyes widened. Vithrak pressed the blade harder. You wanted power, War Commander? You will watch me use it, and you will learn what it costs to serve something larger than your own ambition. He gave the order. It would start a civil war. He gave it anyway. The vibration hits Tobin in the chest before the sound does. A hum so deep it feels like a second heartbeat. He waits, counts to 60. The voice does not speak again. The cube on the pedestal sits dark and cold. He tucks the memory core into his jacket and turns toward the corridor he came through. The wall is smooth, no seam, no door. He runs his hand across the surface. It is warm, warmer than before. The structure has closed behind him. Tobin rolls his left shoulder. The old wound aches. He breathes slowly and thinks about the path. 7 turns. He counted them on the way in. The corridor that led to the chamber was the third left after the entrance hall, but the entrance hall no longer exists in the direction he remembers. He chooses a new direction. The corridor narrows. The light shifts from white to amber. On the Thorrax bridge, the air smells of blood. Vithrak stands with one hand pressed against the navigation console. The wound on his arm has stopped bleeding. The scales around it are cracked and dry. 3 of Zalos's officers lie unconscious near the blast doors. The rest of the Loyalists have taken firing positions at the secondary entrances. Ithra Vorn approaches him. Her gold-speckled scales catch the light from the tactical display. She is shaking. High Cleric, the structure, I have been analyzing the scan data. He blinks one eye at a time. Speak. It is not a ruin. It is not a tomb. It is a guardian. Vithrak turns to face her. A guardian of what? She hesitates. The humans brought something to the surface. A cube. The structure registered it as a valid key. It is not defending itself against them. It is defending what they are carrying. The bridge hums with the low vibration of the void reactor. Vithrak looks at the tactical display. The nebula swirls in greens and golds. Somewhere inside it, the human ship is hiding. And what is it guarding? He asks. Ithra shakes her head. I do not know, but I do know that the structure predates the first Thorrax scripture by more than 40,000 cycles. It was built by something that understood engineering at a level we cannot measure. Tobin finds the second chamber by accident. He takes a turn he does not recognize, and the corridor opens into a space smaller than the first. The walls are lined with alcoves. Each one contains a piece of equipment. The amber light is brighter here. The air smells of ozone. He steps forward. In the third alcove on the left, he sees a signal ghost. This device emits a false sensor echo. It can project a phantom fleet across an entire star system, but it is not the portable version. This one is the size of a cargo container. The crystalline antennae are as thick as his arm. They are arranged in a cluster that vibrates audibly even in standby. The housing is etched with symbols he does not recognize. The shape is unmistakable. He reaches out and touches the activation plate. The hum changes. It drops in pitch and deepens until he feels it in his teeth. The antennae begin to glow, a soft blue that pulses in rhythm with the vibration. On the Thorrax bridge, the tactical display screams. Ithra Vorn gasps. Vithrak turns. The display shows a human armada appearing from the nebula, 50 ships, 60, 100. The signatures are clean, the formations are precise. They are already in weapons range. Vithrak stares at the display. He does not move. Close-range scan, now. The Thorrax sensor operator works his console. The results appear in a line of text that Vithrak reads 3 times before he understands it. There is nothing there. The armada is an echo, a projection, a ghost, but the scale of it. Vithrak touches the scar on his jawline. The humans built this. They placed it in this structure before they regressed. They left it for their descendants. He looks at Ithra. They are not young, they are not primitive, they are ancient, and they have been hiding. Ithra meets his eyes. The question, she says quietly, is why? Tobin stands in the equipment room and understands. He looks at the signal ghost, the size of a cargo container, capable of projecting a false fleet across an entire system. He looks at the other alcoves, a void reactor, smaller than the one on the reliable Favor but cleaner, more efficient. A fold drive core, its casing transparent, showing the contained space inside. A dozen pieces of technology that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. This is not a monument. It is not a tomb. It is a contingency plan. The ancient humans built this structure before their civilization collapsed. They stocked it with tools. They left it here waiting for the day when their descendants would find it again. For the day when someone like Tobin would walk through these corridors and pick up the pieces of a war that ended before his species had written language. He holds the memory core in his hands. It is warm. It pulses with the same light as the signal ghost. He wonders what else is in this structure. Tobin finds the third chamber because the structure guides him there. The corridor widens. The amber light brightens to white. The hum of the signal ghost fades into the background. He walks for 100 meters, maybe 200. He loses count of the turns. The chamber is circular like the first one, but there is no pedestal in the center. There is a weapon. It is a void-tier blade, but not the handheld version that the Thorrax salvaged from the buried warship. This one is mounted on a gimbal. The barrel as wide as Tobin's torso. The black metal drinks the light from the chamber. It does not cut matter, it erases it from local spacetime, and this one is full-sized. Tobin looks at it and understands what the ancient humans built it for. This is not a personal weapon. This is a ship-mounted cannon. It could erase a planet from existence. It could erase a star. The ancient humans did not build this to defend themselves. They built it to end something. On the Thorrax ship, the communication console lights up. The signal is desperate, distorted, broadcast on an open channel. It is Zalo's Sethar. His voice carries the raw edge of a cornered predator. The humans have a superweapon. The cleric who was supposed to stop them has betrayed the faith. I call upon every loyal warrior of the Horde to witness. The structure is a weapon. The humans are armed, and Vithrak has given them time to prepare. Vithrak closes his eyes. He feels the vibration of the signal ghost through the deck plates. He feels the weight of the scar on his jawline. He does not know what to do. Tobin looks at the cannon. He looks at the memory core in his hands. He thinks about lies on the shuttle waiting for him. He thinks about Orin trying to translate a voice that has not spoken again. He hears the structure hum. It is not a random vibration. It is a word. A single word repeating on a loop in a language older than anything living. It is the same word that Orin heard at the entrance. Welcome. The cold settled into Tobin's bones as he stood before the weapon. The chamber was dark, lit only by the ambient pulse of the power core, a soft blue glow that throbbed like a heartbeat. He pressed the memory core against his chest, feeling its warmth through his jacket. The cube was alive. He knew that now. He did not know how he knew the activation sequence. His fingers moved across the surface of the cube without conscious thought, tracing patterns that felt ancient and familiar, like muscle memory from a life he had never lived. The cube hummed. Light spilled from its surface, weaving into a shape in the air before him. The consciousness spoke, not in words exactly. It pressed images and sensations directly into his mind, bypassing language entirely. He saw stars, thousands of them, ships moving between them, sleek and silent, carrying people who looked like him but walked differently, held themselves differently. They were confident. They were certain of their place in the galaxy. The first expansion, humanity rising from a single world to claim 100, 1,000. The technology was beautiful and terrible, void-tier blades that erased matter from existence, ships that could fold space with such precision that they arrived exactly where they intended every time, power that could reshape planets. Tobin saw the fracture. It came slowly like a crack spreading across ice. The factions formed around ideas, around philosophies, around the question of what humanity should become. The debates turned to arguments. The arguments turned to violence. The violence turned to war. The war was not against aliens. It was against other humans. Tobin's breath caught. He watched cities dissolve. He watched ships become clouds of debris. He watched people erased from spacetime, their existence reduced to a memory no one would carry. The weapons were clean. That was the worst part. They did not leave bodies. They did not leave wreckage. They simply made things not exist anymore. The consciousness showed him the end. The survivors gathered on a single world, a world that had been spared the fighting because it was too small, too poor, too insignificant to matter. They made a choice. They would forget. They would bury the technology, scatter to the stars, and live as simple people. They would trade their power for peace. Regression was not a collapse. It was a choice. Tobin lowered his hands. The cube flickered. He understood now. The buried warship the Thorrax found, the void-tier blade they could not activate, the structure he stood in now. All of it was part of the forgetting. All of it was a desperate attempt to lock away the past. He asked the question without speaking. Why are you telling me this now? The consciousness answered with an image. A Thorrax ship, its hull lined with symbols Tobin did not recognize. In its cargo hold, a weapon, not a blade, something larger, something that hummed with the same frequency as the chamber around him. The Thorrax found the first buried weapon. They are trying to use it. Tobin's blood went cold. The weapon in this chamber was not a cannon. It was a countermeasure. It could reach across the galaxy, lock onto the Thorrax weapon, and destroy it. The power core glowed brighter, as if sensing his intent. But activating it would reveal this structure to every faction that was looking. Thorrax, Morthari, Riven, all of them. The ghosts would become real, the secret would be broken. Tobin stood still for a long moment. The low thrum of the weapon's power core pressed against his skull, a sound that was barely audible but felt like pressure behind his eyes. His lips were dry. He cracked them open, tasted stale air. He understood the choice. Activate the weapon and start a new arms race. Leave it dormant and let the Thorrax use the first weapon against humanity. He looked down at his hand, the hand that had counted fuel rods and calculated debts and signed contracts that meant nothing in the face of extinction. The hand of a broker, a middleman, a man who had spent 30 years running from hard choices. Tobin touched the activation panel. The surface was cold and smooth under his fingertips. The power core thrummed louder, responding to his presence. He did not press. He was not the person who should make this decision. The realization hit him like a blow to the chest. He was not a soldier. He was not a leader. He was a man who had watched his crew bleed and his ship break and his hopes shrink to the size of a single fuel rod. He had no right to decide the fate of a technology that predated his entire civilization. His hand trembled. He felt the weight of the memory core against his chest, the weight of 40,000 years of forgotten history, the weight of a choice he was not qualified to make. Tobin lifted his hand from the panel. He stepped back. The power core dimmed slightly, disappointed or indifferent, he could not tell. No, he would not activate the weapon. He pressed the memory core harder against his chest. The schematics were in there. The history was in there. The truth was in there, and it belonged to everyone, not to a single exhausted broker standing in a dark room at the edge of the galaxy. He would take the memory core back to his ship. He would broadcast the data to every channel he could reach. Human stations, Thorrax frequencies, Morthari relays, Riven trade networks. He would end the secrecy. He would force the galaxy to face the truth of what humanity was, what humanity had been, what humanity could become again. Let them fight over it. Let them argue and scheme and tear each other apart. At least it would be an honest fight, fought with eyes open, not a war built on secrets and buried weapons. Tobin turned toward the exit. The structure groaned, the walls vibrated. A deep bass tone rolled through the chamber, shaking dust from the ceiling. Tobin grabbed the pedestal to steady himself. The power core flared, casting angry red light across the walls. Something had changed. A voice crackled over his wristcom, Liza's voice, sharp and urgent. Tobin, get out. Get out now. We have company. He raised the comm to his mouth. What kind of company? Fold signatures, multiple, large Thorrax design. They're not scout ships, Tobin, they're warships. A fleet just dropped out of Fold space and they are coming straight for us. Tobin looked at the activation panel. The weapon glowed, patient and waiting. Outside the structure, Zalos's message had reached the Horde. The Thorrax knew where they were. The choice was no longer theoretical. He touched the panel again, and did not press. The silence after Tobin's broadcast stretched for 17 seconds. 17 seconds of absolute nothing on every channel. No static, no transmissions, no threats. Liz Durant stared at her console like it had betrayed her. She tapped a diagnostic. The system was working. There was simply nothing to receive. Oren Basel stood in the corner of the bridge, one hand resting on the memory core where it sat secured in its mounting. His fingers trembled, barely visible. Tobin saw them. Sylvie Oster was in the pilot's seat, her hands loose on the controls. She was not flying. There was nowhere to go. Cora Delacroix had stopped knitting. The needles were still in her hands, motionless. She was watching Tobin. He could feel all of them watching him. He rolled his left shoulder. The old wound ached. It always ached when he had done something irreversible. The silence broke. A single channel opened. encrypted in a protocol Orin identified as Thorrax High Command. The voice that came through was not Thrax. It was older, colder. It did not breathe between words, the High Cleric of the Morthari. The message was short. 3 sentences in a trade pidgin the observer had used during earlier negotiations. Orin translated as it played. The humans were not the first to build such weapons. They were the only ones who chose to unbuild them. This changes nothing. The channel closed. Tobin stared at the empty display. He felt the weight of that final sentence. This changes nothing. The High Cleric had said it with the certainty of a creature that had watched civilizations rise and fall for longer than humanity had existed. The Morthari did not care about redemption. They cared about feeding. Another channel opened. This one was different. The encryption was lower. The signal was routing through multiple relays, a broadcast, not a private line. Someone was speaking to the entire Horde fleet. Thrax. His voice came through the speakers, rough with age and something else, something raw. He was not reading from a script. He was speaking from memory, from the wound that his oath had left in him. The war you have been fighting is a lie. Tobin heard the intake of breath from Ithra Vorn on the other end of the channel. She was there. She was listening. The humans are not prey. They are survivors of a tragedy this galaxy has never faced. They built weapons that could erase stars. They chose to bury them. They chose to forget. We have been hunting a people who already defeated themselves. A new voice cut in. Zalos S. Sethar, sharp and furious. This is heresy. You are speaking against the sacred texts. The sacred texts, Thrax replied, say nothing about a structure older than the faith itself. The sacred texts say nothing about a weapon that predates our first temple. The sacred texts were written by creatures who did not know what the humans had done. I am speaking what I have seen. The channel went quiet. Tobin waited. On the tactical display, the Horde fleet had not moved. The ships held position at the edge of the nebula. The ancient structure hummed behind them, a constant low vibration that Tobin could feel through the deck plates. Liz spoke without looking up from her console. They are not firing. They are not firing, Orin confirmed. They are not doing anything. Command authority has collapsed. No one knows who to obey. Another channel opened. Ithra Vorn, her voice steadier than Tobin had ever heard it. I am translating the ancient data for the fleet. Every ship will receive it. The Horde will see what the humans were, what they chose to become. Zalos shouted something, his voice distorted by interference. The channel cut before the words resolved. Tobin heard a sound like a struggle, then silence. The Horde fleet held position. Tobin closed his eyes. He had expected weapons fire. He had expected the Morthari to demand his crew's surrender. He had expected a fight, a chase, a desperate last stand in a system no one would remember. Instead, there was nothing. He opened his eyes. He leaned forward and keyed the wideband channel himself. His voice was hoarse. He had been talking for the better part of an hour, telling the story of the first expansion, the war, the weapon, the long forgetting. His throat ached. We are not a threat, he paused. The words felt small, insufficient. We are a warning. The galaxy can learn from our history or repeat it. The choice is not ours. We already made ours. He cut the channel. The hum of the structure filled the silence. Louder now, or maybe he was just paying attention, a deep resonant thrum that vibrated through the hull. The ancient facility was still active, still broadcasting the signal, still waking up. Tobin sat down in the pilot's seat. Sylvie moved aside without a word. She stood behind him, her arms crossed, her eyes fixed on the external display. The nebula glowed green and purple, beautiful and hostile. He had no destination. He had no plan. He had the memory core pulsing against his chest. He had a crew watching him. He had a galaxy that was about to learn the truth whether it wanted to or not. The structure hummed one last time. The signal ghost flickered. And somewhere in the dark between stars, a door had opened that no one could close again. Tobin looked at the display and saw the Thorrax fleet begin to move, not toward them, away. They were withdrawing. The war was over. The question was what came next.